co-host to present like slides or
No,
something like this?
no, I'm just basically a conversation. Like, I don't have any slides or anything.
Okay.
Ok. Hola e obrigado para me convidar. Now I'm going to switch from Portuguese to English because that's basically all the Portuguese I know. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, what basically I'm going to do in the next hour, hour and a half, or however long you feel this needs to take, is I'm going to be talking about major international tournaments, such as the World Debating Championship or Worlds, and what to do in order to prepare for them, whether you're a speaker or whether you're a judge. I've received, which I was very happy to receive, some questions from people of what it is you would like me to talk about. I'll try and answer those questions to the extent that I can. At any point, I really want this to be a conversation. So if you have questions, if you have things that are unclear, please let me know and I'll be happy to go more in depth into things. And obviously, in the end, if you feel there are things that you want me to cover and I haven't touched on, I'd be happy to discuss those as well. And feel free to write stuff in the chat if you want to ask me any questions or anything of that sort. So basically, there are two parts to this, right? When we're talking about major internationals, there is the preparation, which is most of the time that you're actually spending, and there is the tournament itself, like the time that the tournament actually takes. So these are going to be the two main parts I'm going to be talking about. I'm first going to say a few words about myself, first of all, since some people asked about it, and also just to give like a context to who I am and why I'm talking to you about these things. But I do want to say I will be talking during the entire conversation. A lot of the things I'll say are from my own personal experience. Some of that experience might not be the most useful in certain situations. Some of it you might have things that work better for you. Some things, I may have done wrong, and I have suggestions now for how I could have done them better. So just take everything I say with a grain of salt. If I give an advice here and you think this advice really doesn't work for you, obviously you know more about yourself and about your path as a debater or as a judge than I do in this conversation where I'm basically speaking I don't really have the time to go in depth into each and every one of you, what your needs are and so on. So just take everything in this perspective. A bit about myself. I joined debating at a relatively late age. I joined, I think, when I was 24, which in Israel isn't that old because we have mandatory conscription for 3 years. So usually people start university relatively late. Anyway, my first 2 years in debating, I've had exactly one speaker break at a tournament. It took me 2 years, after which I made the ESL break at the European Universities Debating Championship. But up until that point, I had, besides that, one break throughout the 2 years where I've spoken at quite a few tournaments. Then things started to, gain momentum. I found a regular partner that I was speaking with, Dan Lahav, who is now the chief adjudicator of the coming WUDC. Together we had a year with quite a lot of breaks, but really let's say, the point. Sorry, can everyone please mute themselves because I'm hearing myself sort of with an echo. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, basically Euros 2015 was when we really made the jump forward. We were the most surprised about this, I think, when we made the open final of Euros that year as an ESL team. And part of that was we took risks. We did some things that were like really out of the box in the sense of how we debated and the way the sort of cases we ran and so on. But obviously part of it was luck. I don't think at that point we were actually at the level of most of the teams that made an open break. And this is something I'll address once time and again during this conversation, which is you can do your best, but there is a large element of luck within this game, and it's really important to remember. It's really important to remember because we often blame ourselves or judge ourselves very harshly according to things that are often just chance. And obviously we want to do our best, but at some point there is an element of luck to it. Like Euros 2015, we made the open final. We spoke again at Euros a year later. We were a much stronger team, but we got knocked out at open quarter. So you never know how it works. Then I did Worlds 3 times, 2016, 2017, and 2018, where 2016 was a great year for us. This was the first time we were speaking at Worlds. And although we broke open on the 47th out of 48 open breaking teams, we made the open semi, which was for us really an achievement that we were very, very proud of. And I got ESL top speaker that year. The year after that was not such a good year in the sense that we had a disastrous first day where we ended on, I think, 4 points. And then from there, we recovered quite well, but still with quite low speaks overall. And then when we got knocked out at quarters with what we still feel was not necessarily a correct call, which sucks, but again, is something that happens. After that, personally, I thought I was out. I thought like I was done with debating. I went on a 5-month trip, long trip to South America, actually, among which I've spent a month in Brazil. And I thought I was done with debating. I've had quite a few achievements. I was happy with where I've gotten and so on. But then I decided at some point, like I came back to Israel, I started university again, and I decided I am going to do it one last Worlds in Worlds Mexico. And this was like the run-up we had to Mexico Worlds was phenomenal. This was like definitely the peak of my debating career, where we made the final of the Oxford IV, won the Cambridge IV, and then broke top at Worlds. First time an ESL team did that. Hopefully not the last time. I trust there are excellent teams right now in the field that are definitely going to do amazing things this Worlds and in the next rounds of it as well. And I think people asked me in the questions, and this is why I even bring up like myself and what I've done. People ask like, what were the things that for me like brought the achievements and so on. I would say up until 2017, it was mostly just spending a long time debating, working hard, improving and learning lessons from tournament to tournament. Between 2017 and 2018, there was also a mental switch. A mental switch really, really helped. And I'm going to touch on that quite extensively when I talk about what to do in the tournament itself, because a lot of what tournaments are, a long tournament like Worlds, a lot of what it is about managing yourself psychologically, being able to provide your best consistently throughout numerous rounds. And I'm going to talk about that, what that means and how I think that should be done. Now, I'm going to say if you take one sentence from this workshop, let it be this sentence, which is, major internationals are not a sprint run, they're a marathon. Not a sprint run, but a marathon. What do I mean by that? There are different fields of athletics where if you are doing a sprint, you have to like give your strongest effort right at the beginning, because the beginning is basically the end. Like it's one chance, you give all you have, you like kill yourself over those 60 meters or whatever. When you're running a marathon, you have to conserve your energy. And that's a big part of what a long tournament is. A tournament with 9 rounds, essentially, the first 3 rounds are warm-up. They mean almost nothing. Like I have seen teams that ended round 4 on 10 points and did not break at the tournament. I've seen this. I've seen teams that last year at Worlds the team that won the ESL, that won in the ESL category, ended day one on 2 points. They broke on 20 points. Like they had 6 firsts in a row, and with that they could have broken open had they not like conceded the category. Why is this important? Because the most important thing, the most important quality you want to have as a team competing at a major international is consistency. If you are a team that takes a second every round throughout the entire tournament, numerically, you will make the open final of Worlds. That's how the math works. If you are a team that takes sometimes firsts and sometimes fourths and thirds, you have a good chance of not breaking. So being brilliant and clever and so on is really nice. It's fun, but the most important skill in order to be able to break at a major international tournament is consistency, is doing the basics really well. It's making sure that the worst round that you have is not that bad, meaning that you take as many points as you can from whichever round, that you're like solid even on your worst subject, rather than you do one like amazing debate where you get like a pair of 85s and then the rest of the tournament is bad and you end up not breaking and disappointed about it. So consistency. What does that mean? How does that come into play? That's what a lot of this conversation is going to be about. At this point, are there any questions? Anything you want to ask me? If you want, write in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask. If not, I will continue.
I have one question. Like, are you going to talk more about like the shift that you have before like breaking at like in only one championship, like within 2 years, or we should ask about it right now, like right away?
I could talk about it a bit later, because I think so. I think my answer to the switch from like breaking, like having one break in 2 years and then breaking a lot of things, was just gaining experience and gradually doing better. Like I don't think there is a trick to it, except what I'm going to be talking about right now, which is like how you practice and so on. So if you don't feel it covers it, I could come back to that later. Okay, so one of the questions I got, and now I'm talking about like how to practice, how to train and so on. One of the questions I got was how many hours a day did I spend practicing? And this was a hard question for me, because I didn't have a concrete number to give, because there were weeks where I would do like 3 training sessions of like 2 rounds plus do a tournament or crazy things like that. There would be other weeks where I would just come to one practice. Like, first of all, there is life outside debating, and that life is important. And I would not recommend to anyone to spend months and months just like, you know, doing 2 practice rounds a day. I know some people that do this stuff. To an extent, I admire it, but I don't think it's necessary. And I also think it can be harmful. Like, people can burn out. People can reach a situation where they're just tired of debating, they don't want to do it anymore. And basically, 2 things that are really important to remember. 1, debating is a long game. Like, every individual tournament, there is a lot of arbitrariness. A lot of things are going to be random. The way you measure your improvement is tournament after tournament after tournament, not just one specific instance. And what that means is, if you're not playing the long game, if you're like, I'm going to do like 40 hours a week, I'm obviously exaggerating massively, but like, I'm going to do 3 practice sessions every week from now to Worlds in July, most chances you're going to burn out, you're going to neglect other important parts of your life, and you are going to come there when even if you do that Worlds, you will not want to debate after that Worlds is over, and that's just not fun. Like, and here's the second really important thing that I'm going to be drilling into more later. The next thing we're going to say is, think about when you joined debating. Did you join debating hoping to break at the World Universities Debating Championship? The answer, I'm going to guess, is no, since you didn't know there was such a thing as the World Universities Debating Championship. Likely scenario is you join debating in order to learn some skills that might be useful for you in life, and to meet new people, and to have fun, like a fun activity to do. And I think that's a really good motivation. And I think you should remember that motivation, because unless, like, you know, you won worlds at the open category and that helped you get a job at like Bridgewater or something, which is a very, very rare subset of cases, in a few years, nobody's going to care. And that's, again, really important to remember, in the sense of, this is a game, this is something we do for fun. Don't beat yourself up too much over it. Don't, like, you know, I know this seems like the wrong thing to say when you're talking to people like practicing for an international tournament, but I think this is a really important perspective for people to have in mind. I also think that reducing stress is one of the key things in order to do well in debating and in many other activities as well. All that being said, this was like disclaimers. Let's talk about how you practice. And I think that the more important question isn't how much you practice, it's how you do it. Because a lot of people train ineffectively. Like, for instance, you say, okay, I'm going to do 2 rounds of debate each day. Very soon, those rounds give you very little. Like, there is a very clear law of diminishing returns on what those rounds are going to do for you, especially if you're doing these rounds with the same people that you're always debating with, and if you're doing it with the same judges. The likely scenario is you're not going to improve very much, even if you do a lot of it. So what can you do in order to optimize your training? First of all, I think the most basic mistake people do is they treat every practice session as a round in a tournament that they need to win. Like saying, I got to take a first in this practice session. And I heard this even, I think, before I joined debating. I have a friend who's a really talented musician. And he told me something that I keep telling people I coach in debating and in other things as well. If you are practicing and it sounds good, this is not good practice, because it means you're not stretching your limits, you're not doing things that are hard for you, and you're not doing things that you're unused to. So I think very much the same thing is true for debating. If you are trying to take a first, you will always do the exact same thing that has worked for you before. That means you are less likely to develop new skills. You are less likely to work on your weak points. What do I recommend doing instead? First of all, identifying what my weak spots are at the moment. How do you do that? Basically, you listen to feedback. You listen to judge feedback, and you see what points repeat themselves time after time. If I constantly am told that my rebuttal isn't good, like I rebutted this team for like 2 minutes, but it didn't do anything, all their points remain standing. Probably there is a problem with my rebuttal. So identify, this is a major problem that I have. How do I know it's a major problem? Because I'm told consistently, had you done this, you might have come over this team. Like, you might have taken another point if you had done rebuttal. You might have won the debate if you had prioritized yourself in the whip speech against this other team. Any of these things is, if I hear it not once, but like I hear it 3 times, I hear it 5 times, I hear it from different judges telling me this thing, this is probably a weak point that I need to work on. So first of all, just identifying what my weak points are. Now, if you are a beginning speaker, you're going to have many weak points. Like, many things are still going to be weak. What you need to do is prioritize. See which of these things is the most important, in the sense of, first of all, how much you get told that this is a problem. But also, what do you think, like, is the thing you want to work on? Like, just decide, because you can't work on everything at the same time. You need to have one very defined goal. And when you have that defined goal, like, let's say you've decided, now I want to focus on improving my rebuttal. Then in the next practice rounds, this is what you're going to do. you're going to spend 5 minutes of your speech on rebuttal. You're going to make sure that you have done like extensive rebuttal to arguments that you're getting. Will this win you the debate? Likely not. The likely scenario is if 5 minutes of your speech, 6 minutes of your speech is rebuttal, you're probably not going to win the debate. But you're going to improve on that skill that you've said, I want to improve on. So first of all is just tell yourself, it's the goal for me is not taking the first. The goal for me is doing rebuttal for 5 minutes. The goal is to have one point of rebuttal that I actually told by the judge refuted the point made by the other side. I'm going to have my goal in this debate is to make at least 2 different weighings to explain why my team beat this other team. And that's your goal. And if you take a 4th, that's unimportant. What's important is you have done this specific thing and you've gotten better at it. And this is the way to make much more use of your practice round. Second, also, ask judges to give you feedback about that specific thing. Not after the debate, before your speech. Tell the judge, I am now practicing this thing. I would really appreciate if you could give me feedback about how I've done this. And judges, like, you know, are decent human beings generally, and they want to help us, especially if we're in practice rounds. Don't do this at Worlds, just to be clear. You can do this in tournaments, by the way. I've had speakers come to me in tournaments and say before their speech, I am working on this and this thing. Please give me feedback about it. And I was very happy to give it. Like, but at Worlds, I would probably recommend against doing this. But generally in tournaments, yeah, you can also do this. Use the fact that in tournaments you're getting different judges, you're getting different perspectives. Ask for feedback. Ask your partner for feedback. Ask your partner to remind you of these things. Like you can have goals that are individual goals. Like for example, if I were to come back to debating right now, I know because I've done some like, you know, random practices here or there, I have a terrible time management at the moment. Like I just talk about stuff I'm interested in and not focusing strategically on what's important. I don't make enough arguments and so on. So if I were now to come back to speak at Worlds, I would probably need, I still have 1 Worlds left, technically I could do that. I would need to make sure that I am, I would need to make sure that my time management is better. So I would ask my partner to literally write down how much time I've spent on each point and tell me after the debate, you have spent too much time on this point, you should have stopped like at 3 instead of 4 and gone on to something else. Use your partner, that's really useful as well. Notice this can be the things you're trying to improve, your goals can be individual things, like for example, I want to work on my rebuttal and so on. This can also be group things, like as a team. As a team, we need to have more, we need to have better coordination between us. Like we need to be able to communicate with each other better. Or as a team, we need to make more, we are only making practical arguments. We suck at making principles. In the next like 4 or 5 debates, we're only making principled arguments. Even if we fail, even if it sucks, even if all the teams laugh at us, we are going to make principled arguments in order to work on this specific skill that we want to develop. So this is one way of using your training time better. Are there any questions on this specifically? Because this is a really important part of improvement.
I have one question.
Of course.
Do you think it is better when you're training these specific abilities to train and test them on a full debate training, or to like do drills that are more specified for them?
Excellent question. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about like different drills that you can do as well. But I think at the end, you want to make sure that you're actually able to do this within a debate. Like, let's put it this way. If you have done drill after drill after drill about rebuttal, just about rebuttal, and then but you are used to, you have a problem where you're always just talking about substantive in the debate itself. So like, because you have a lot of interesting points, there's stuff you want to talk about, and you don't really care about listening to what all these other people are saying. So the fact that you've done drills isn't enough. because you want to make sure that you're actually able to implement that within the debate. So I think working on stuff as part of drills is excellent, but you also need to make sure that they're actually coming through in debates. Also, notice that when you're doing drills, usually you don't have a judge present. You don't have some objective external person telling you, have you succeeded in this drill or not? And this is really important because usually when we're talking about things that are skills we need to develop, usually they might be blind spots, like things I don't notice I'm doing. I don't notice that I have this problem. So at the end of the day, you still need to have someone evaluating you and seeing how you're implementing these things. Does that make sense? Cool.
Yeah, it does. Thanks a lot.
Sure. So next, we're going to talk about, oh, yeah, sure.
I have a question before, sorry. So do you have some tips when your weak point in debating is not the style, but the subject?
Subject, okay. Like, for example, not knowing about certain things, research and so on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to have a different section about that, so I'll leave it for them, but definitely, obviously, an important topic as well. Okay, so just a second. Yeah, just one more thing about that. At some point, if you're doing this consistently, if you've identified a problem and you've practiced it over and over, at some point this will stop being a problem, hopefully. Like, hopefully you will become better at this. Like, there was a time when Dan and I were, after Vienna Euros, which was the Euros where we made the open final, we knew we were much stronger when we were a bottom half team than when we were a top half. Like, we were better at CG and CO than we were at OG and OO. So obviously in practice, we always asked to get OG and OO in order to practice it a lot. Then at some point it shifted and we were now better at OG and OO than we were at CG and CO, and we had to switch back. So be mindful, you've identified something, that something needs to get solved at some point, and then you'll have to shift to something else and practice that, because otherwise you're just treading water, like you're stuck in the same place. So be mindful of when you've actually achieved your goal and move on to another goal. Now, about tournaments. Tournaments are, first of all, they're great. Like, we are now in the probably most accessible time debating has ever had, in the sense of you can be sitting in your home in Brazil and doing a tournament anywhere in the East Coast of the US, and it's basically almost the same time zone. Like, and that's amazing. Like, that's really amazing. If I had that option of like debating in Europe every weekend when I was still active in debating, I would definitely have wanted to do a lot more of that. And it costs less and no flights and so on and so forth. Still important, don't burn yourselves out. Again, if you're doing a tournament every weekend, if, as some people are doing, you're doing 2 tournaments simultaneously the same weekend, you will at some point burn out and just become completely exhausted with it. So manage it, like, take it easy on yourselves. Know your own limits. This is really important, especially now when everything is so available. Having said that, doing tournaments is great because it gives you the chance to meet different judges and different teams and different styles than what you're used to. And especially when you're coming to Worlds, that's really, really important, because Worlds is everyone. You're going to have, let's say you're very used to how Latin American judges judge, or even you've done some tournaments in the US and you're used to how American judges judge. I am sorry for you, but you will have to, you probably have to deal with quite a lot of those. No, just kidding, no offense, but anyway, and then you come to Worlds and you're judged by Asian judges and you're judged by Australian judges, and you have no idea what these people are on about. Like, because obviously there are different judging styles, there are different judging metrics, but also there are, it's uncomfortable to say, but there are different accents. And sometimes you'll get a Scottish team against you, and they're speaking really fast with a Scottish accent, and you have no idea what the hell they're saying. And that makes it quite hard to rebut them. So knowing different teams, knowing different circuits is really, really valuable. And you have an excellent chance or opportunity to actually do that because you have the ability of joining tournaments through Zoom. So try to do diverse tournaments in the sense of try not only to do tournaments within your region, try to do tournaments outside your region. If you're going for worlds, if you're going for something that is actually international, try doing some tournaments at different cities, at different continents, at different circuits. Don't do it often, because if you are sitting in Brazil doing tournaments on Australian timeline, on Australian time zone, again, this might be really exhausting because it means debating in the middle of the night. But occasionally doing this is really useful. It's really useful if you're a speaker. It's really useful to get to know others and to get some sort of reputation, like having a reputation of like people knowing you, people getting used to your accent, for example, because again, there are issues of like judges misunderstanding teams or and so on. So the more judges that have seen you give cases, that know you to some extent, the better it is for you. As judges, it's even much more important. If you are going to Worlds as a judge, it's really, really useful to do some tournaments and to judge some things in other circuits as well. Why? First of all, because even judging styles, as I've said, can vary. Judging the way people like manage panels, for example, can change massively between circuits, and knowing that can be really useful. I'll give you an example. I was DCAing Worlds last year, and I was a wing I was a chair. I was a chair in round one, and I had a wing, I think Australian, who apparently did not know I was a DCA of the tournament. And he, at the end, and the way I manage a panel is I ask my panelists, I go around, I ask my panelists for their calls. I don't necessarily reveal my call. Like I don't really reveal my call because I don't want to like skew the panel to one or the other direction. It's also easier for me to just direct the discussion if they don't feel like I'm biased towards this view. That's like in Europe, that's quite the usual way of managing a panel. So I was doing that, and the guy, as I said, probably did not know I was a DCA, submitted feedback on me, gave me a 6. And the reason is, he said, I don't really know if he's a good judge because he didn't reveal this call. And so these are the stuff that, if you're a judge, can really fuck you up for stupid reasons, because it doesn't actually say anything about you as a judge, but this number is now on your on your ballot. This is the feedback you've gotten. So knowing what different circuits are like is really useful. Also, again, accents. If you have never heard people from a specific nationality or a specific region speak, and they have heavy accents of some sort, or they speak really fast or something like that, it's going to be much harder for you to be able to assess what they're actually saying when you're judging them in a debate. And therefore, exposing yourselves to different circuits, different environments makes you a better judge, and it allows you to adjudicate debates better. Also, I'm going to be like, as you notice, I'm simultaneously trying to talk about two different things, which is how to prepare yourself as a speaker and how to prepare yourself as a judge. And they are quite distinct, but I understand some people are doing either, so it's important for me to cover both. And both are really important. Like, I don't think some people, say that, the speaker break is the important thing, and judges are just there, the people who didn't make the cut of the teams going in. I really don't believe in that. I think judging is super important. It's super important to develop your society. It's super important to understand debating better. So I really think it's important. So I'm trying to, cover both things. So as a judge, the judge break at Worlds, I know, as I said, I know the CA quite well. I know it's going to be a very mathematical break. Like, it's going to be based solely on the CV score you have, the feedback you're getting, and your judge test. That's going to be it. There's not going to be an evaluation of like, do I know this guy? What do you think about him? And so on and so forth. That's not going to be there. However, still, in the way people rank judges, there is a lot of subjectivity. The more people know you, the likelier it is that they are going to take account of what you're doing, of your contribution, and so on. So again, being known in different circuits is helpful. it doesn't mean that if you're not known, you can't make achievements. That's absolutely untrue, and it's really important to stress this. Like, you can do very well even if people don't know you, but if you can get this advantage, it's a useful one to get. So so I do recommend going to different tournaments in different circuits and so on. Now, besides that, yeah, remember, what's important for you in a tournament is not necessarily going to the tournament with the strongest teams in it. Like, when I was preparing for Worlds and I knew I'm going to probably speak in the open break, it was really important to me to speak at things like Oxford IV, Cambridge IV, tournaments where I knew like the strongest teams speaking in that Worlds in the open category are going to be there. I'm going to be completely frank here. I'm guessing none of you is going to this tournament hoping to beat Harvard A. And it's not, and therefore it's not necessary for you to make that sort of prioritization. For you, the thing that should be the most important is asking yourselves, in what tournament will I get the highest quality of judging that I can? And therefore, sometimes the tournaments that are like packed with those dinosaur crazy teams are going to be tournaments that have bad judging because all the good debaters are speaking at them. So on the other hand, if you see tournaments that, for example, have a high subsidy for judges, that's a good tournament. That's usually something that will attract good judges to come to it. So basically, looking at what's likely to be in sense of the level of judging you're going to get is the most important criterion. You can't always know this, but like in terms of how you evaluate, if you have this information, that's probably the most useful one you can use. Okay, another tip for judges when you are when you're judging a tournament, ask for feedback. Just like as speakers, you ask for feedback after each round, and as speakers, please ask for feedback after each round, especially in a tournament. Judges owe you this. That's part of their job. Don't be shy about doing it. As judges as well, ask your chairs for feedback about your judging. Ask them, again, specific questions. Few judges are good at actually giving like extensive judge feedback about how you are as a panelist and so on. If you, again, just like I said for speakers, if you know that you have a specific problem, like did you feel that I was concise enough, like that I said things in a not too long way and not too confusing and so on, ask about that. Ask specifically about, I care about being concise, or I care about making sure that I understand comparatives correctly, or I understand short diagonal comparatives correctly, anything like that, and ask directed questions about to get feedback. This is useful for two reasons. One, you'll get better feedback, like you'll get judges actually paying attention to you and giving you feedback. Second, when a judge is thinking about the feedback they're going to give you, they notice you more. They notice your contribution to the discussion more. That also means they are likely to rank you higher if you've actually done a good job. So ask for feedback. Teams, when you're asking for feedback, again, don't just ask for general feedback. Ask for specific things if it's something you're working on. But also, Dan and I would do things like ask, what is one thing that we could have done to, if let's say we took a second, what was one thing we could have done to make it a closer call for the first, or what could we have done to take the first? Or alternatively, doing things like, asking things like, if you've taken the first, what would be one thing we could do to make our rise one speaker category? Like, if obviously don't ask about your speaks, but say, whatever my speaks are, what could I have done to make them higher? These are useful questions because you'll get interesting insight to what these judges think about you, about your speaking, and you might notice patterns there as well. So use the information you're getting, write it down, super useful. Now about practice sessions themselves. First of all, again, just like in tournaments, the entire world is currently open to you, and that's amazing. Because I know I'm not making any assumptions about your debating society. I don't know. I know very little about it, but usually in most places, there is a problem where debate societies don't have a very developed judging capacity, let's say in-house, and therefore nothing to take them forward. Like even if you have like speakers who are really talented, but there's no one to guide them and tell them like, this is what you should do to get to the next step, sometimes you can get stuck. So right now, you can literally ask any society, anywhere in the world, to join their practice. Do that. Sometimes they'll say no. Go on, ask someone else. No harm done. But literally, it's if you think about it, you can once a week, instead of going to your own society's practice session, go to a practice session at Yale, and that might be quite useful. Like they might give you things there in terms of the insights, in terms of judging, in terms of all these things that you could find very useful and could help you develop further. They obviously offer things in return, like offer to send judges to their practices. People like that, like if you're sending judges to fill panels and so on. But also I think a lot of people will just be happy if it's a one-time thing to just like, yeah, we're a society that just, building itself, Latin America, and we want to send a team to one of your practice sessions. I doubt societies are going to say no. So use that. Just like you asked me here, Nicolas wrote to me and asked me, I'm happy to do it. So I think many people will as well. Also, ask judges from other societies to come to your practice sessions. Now, here's the trick. I thought about this today, so I'm quite happy with this. I'm not entirely sure if this works because I haven't had a chance to try it. But what I would say is, don't ask people who are really high up. Like, I wouldn't go asking Dan Lahav or Jess Musselin or people like that, CAing Worlds and stuff, to come judge your practice session, because they're probably getting hundreds of those requests a week, especially now when everything is online. What I would do, ideally, I think, is looking at people who have a few judge breaks at some tournaments. Like, it doesn't have to be Euros, but people who have some consistent record of breaking at something. These people, like the mid-tier people, are going to be really flattered by getting this offer. Like if I'm, this person in India who has some achievements, or this person in I don't know, the Netherlands who has some judging and speaking achievements, gets an invitation to come help a society in Brazil to judge a practice, they'll be really flattered by the fact that someone thought of them. So I think this is a good way of actually getting people who could help you. Like, they won't be the most amazing judges in the world, but they are going to be quite helpful in giving you different insights, different information. Dohowever, there is also, as I said, a decreasing, like marginal utility or diminishing returns to doing always the same sort of practice, like just doing debate rounds. And here are a few suggestions for other sorts of practice modes you can do. First of all, prep sessions. Just meet with your debate partner. This doesn't require the entire team or the entire debate society to be in. Just you and your partner. Take motions. Either you select them or you have someone else select them for you, and actually simulate prep. Do, like, if you are top half, do like maybe 8-minute, 9-minute discussion, because the rest of the time you'll probably need in order to write and develop your points. If you're doing bottom half, then do the full 15 minutes. And just stop the clock after 15 minutes or after 9 minutes and see where you've gotten. What was good about this prep? What wasn't good about this prep? And do a few of those, like one after the other. You'll notice, first of all, your communication with each other gets better. You'll notice that you're able to come up with more ideas, and you're able to identify problems. Like, let's say, we notice that we constantly, we come up with lots of arguments, but we don't know how to prioritize them. We don't know which arguments are important. Or you say, we come up with arguments, but then when we try and think of clashes, we get confused. Or we think of clashes, but we have nothing to say about them. any of this is really useful insight to have. And then you can come back and think, how am I going to develop this? How am I going to improve on this problem that I have? So just doing prep sessions, the most basic thing. Two important points here. One, actually draw lessons from it. Don't just do prep and don't stop in the middle to actually stock take and understand what was good, what was bad. Second, don't cheat. It's really easy if there's no one else supervising you. You just take 5 more minutes because you haven't come to any good arguments. Don't do that because you're not actually giving yourself fair simulation. Second thing, and this is I think Dan and I quite like to do, and I think one of the more useful things we did was long prep sessions. And what do I mean by that? We would take a topic, like for example, gender and feminism, or IR, or criminal justice, anything like that. And we would take a bunch of motions, just take from tournaments, see what things were run recently on this topic. And we would sit for like 2 or 3 hours and discuss one of two of these motions really in depth. Like really in depth in the sense of, first of all, try to come up with all the arguments you have on this from both sides. Like here's the gov arguments, here's the op arguments. But then also try to go beyond that and just say, what do we actually think about this topic? Like, what is my actual opinion about this? About like, what is, and try to come up with what you as a team think of this topic. Like, because you see, I think I heard this from Bowen Fanella at the time when they said like, the way we approach different debates is very unique to us as a team because we come from our own lived experiences, we come from our own perceptions and so on. Like the way, if I had to defend Marxism, I would probably do it in a very different way than Bo did. Because my perception is different, the way I think about the world is different. If I have to approach an issue of gender, this will probably be different than how a woman approaches an issue of gender or how someone who is a gender minority approaches it. Like there are different attitudes, and figuring out with yourself and with your partner what sort of ideas appeal to you can be really useful. First of all, because it means you're making more complex, more nuanced arguments. When it's not just like, okay, let's throw the first thing that comes to our mind, but actually something we've thought about, we've discussed, we've developed together, they're likely to be more unique, more innovative, and more interesting ideas. But also, we are more likely to be coordinated with each other. If we're bottom half and we now need to switch an extension, it's going to be much easier to do if we've discussed this issue together and we know each other's thoughts on it. So that's, I found that very useful. Other types of unique things you can do. One, this is a personal favorite of mine, though not necessarily an easy one. Do a debate without prep. You come in as CO or CG into an actual debate, just without the 15 minutes prep. You hear the motion the first time when before the Prime Minister stands up to speak, and you have to come with arguments on the spot. Why is this useful? One, this simulates a situation where your extension has been stolen. Like you planned an extension and someone took it, and now you have to think up from scratch. Secondly, it works on your coordination with your partner. Like, because you have to do it on the fly, you have to come up with an extension while other people are talking. You have to, like, the whip has to communicate things quickly to the extension speaker. Useful. Obviously, don't only do this because then you're losing out on like prep time and how to use it and learning that. But occasionally, this can be a useful exercise. I'm going to say again, I don't know what the situation is within your society. If there is, if you are a team that is, I don't know, more experienced than other teams within the society, and you sometimes feel like there is no challenge or you're constantly taking first, again, this could be a useful leveler of like making life more challenging for you. So this can be also a way of applying this this exercise. By the way, the crazier, like the more extreme version of that is doing it as OO. For example, you know, occasionally a team will scroll the motion. Occasionally, you will misread the motion. And this is also something you need to be prepared for. One of my favorite stories from Mexico Worlds. We were, do you know UDIMA, a Spanish team that won the EFL final that year in Worlds? They went on to do quite a lot of impressive stuff in the open category at Euros, at Worlds. Anyway, we had them in the first round, and we were OG, they were OO. And as I am beginning my prime minister's speech, or maybe a minute or 2 minutes in, they realize they have prepped the wrong side of the motion. No, round 1, so you can still recover from anything. Still pretty stressful experience. They managed to recover enough to take a third. They didn't do brilliantly, but they recovered enough to take a third, and that's much better than taking a fourth. And that's only possible when you have some experience of this stuff happening, or it's significantly more likely that you'll be able to recover if you have some experience or some simulation of what a situation like this looks like. So occasionally trying to do a debate without prep. And other things you can do. Watching recordings of debates. Why is this useful? As judges, this is an excellent opportunity to judge debates. Sometimes very high quality debates, sometimes very bad debates, or very difficult to judge debates. You don't need to have your entire society in order to do it, so quite useful. As speakers, what you can do is, for example, prep, and then prep a motion, then see how the teams at World's Final debated the same motion. Did they come up with the same arguments you had? If not, what did they come up with that you didn't get? Why is that? Try to gain as much information from it as you can. Or alternatively, do things like, for example, watch a prime minister's speech, stand up, give a rebuttal, play the recording. What was the actual rebuttal that was given? How does it compare to your rebuttal? Are there things you did that the speaker did not do? Are there things that they did that you didn't? And so on. And again, this can be very useful in opening up your mind to different possibilities, and also it's just sometimes easier because you don't need an entire debate room in order to do a practice. Or, for example, watch the top half and then give an extension. Things like that, and just play with it. What I heard, MDG told me that when he was Michael DG, if you know him, he's world's top speaker, was a world CA, twice world's DCA, very talented guy. Anyway, he told me that when he was speaking competitively, every morning he would do a prime minister's speech. Every morning he would take a motion and do a prime minister's speech about it. And that way he had in a year, he had over 300 prime minister speeches that he's done and that he has practiced. And it takes almost nothing in terms of the amount of time it actually takes you per day. This is not much more than time it would take, less than the time it would take to take a shower in the morning. So things like that. And finally, another exercise I like to do, usually we skip on parts of analysis. We do the analysis to the extent that it stands when it's not rebutted, but we often don't fully develop our arguments to the extent that we can. What you can do is just take a specific argument in a motion and build it as robust as you can. Just all the logical links. Make sure everything is tight. Make sure everything is explained. You have multiple reasons for it. And that way you are just able to practice the skill of analyzing and developing arguments. Do it with your partner. Write down write down all the logical links of the argument. Ask them, where would you attack this argument? How would you rebut it? They give their rebuttal. Build the argument in order to withstand that rebuttal. Keep practicing that. It's a really useful way of just improving your analysis. Because specifically analysis is something you can do on your own. You don't need the entire debate room in order to do it. Unlike weighing or unlike rebuttal, this is something you can practice by yourself. Okay, now we come to the complicated thing called research. Just one. Yeah, this one I would not do with time limit. Like I would not do it with the time limit. Just like, you know, if you want to write a 300 page PhD on it, that's probably too much. But like actually make sure you've closed the argument and you've made it as robust as you can. Because the whole idea is after that, you can like see which part of this are actually necessary and condense it into a shorter argument, but do the actual work of making it as comprehensive as possible. Research, yeah, sure.
I have two questions. One question is about like having like the same teammate like for like most of the championships that you're going to. Like what do you think? Like what are your thoughts on that? And the other thing is like how can I possibly practice weighing and like meta debating or something like that? Because like I'm really trying to learn that, but it's really difficult to like.
Yeah. Okay, so on the first thing, if this is a partnership that works, absolutely continue debating with the same partner. Debate is a team sport. Like you are as good as your team dynamic is. I've seen excellent speakers that made shit teams when they were put together, and where the team was weaker than the sum of its parts. I've seen teams where both speakers were like average, but as a team were excellent because they had great coordination. They really complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses. So I do think that speaking with the same partner consistently can be very, very useful. Obviously, sometimes it might be a bad partnership, and then ending it would probably be better for both sides. I'm going to talk about that a bit more when I talk about the actual tournament in terms of a good partnership isn't only complementing your strengths and weaknesses, but also has to do with psychology, like how well you get along, how do you stress each other out, or do you give each other comfort? These are also really important things. They can be worked on, but if like you have someone that you're really good at speaking with, but also life is like the tournament is a living hell for both of you, probably don't debate with them consistently, because that's not good for anyone. About the question of how to practice meta debating and weighing, it's a tough one. Like I think this can only be properly done within the context of an actual debate. Like it's very hard to do on your own when you don't. In order to do it well, you have to have people surprising you. You have to have people coming up with different arguments that you haven't thought of. What I would say is, first of all, recorded debates can still work for this. Like you hear top half, you hear opening government, opening opposition, and then you ask, okay, if I'm closing government and I have to give a weighing analysis, an analysis that explains why opening the material from gov beats the material from op, what do I do? And that can be a useful way of doing it. Yeah, I think just like I said for anything else, telling yourself, this is what I'm practicing, asking to get feedback about it, asking judges, have I persuaded you of this weighing? Have I persuaded you of this comparative, essentially? And to give you the answer for that, they don't have to be super strong judges. They don't have to be people who really understand meta debating. They have to be the average debate judge that tells you, was this persuasive? Does that make sense?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, cool. Research, let's go on to that. I'll say this, I did not do a lot of research. I have to admit, part of this is I had the privilege of, I have a bachelor's degree in international relations. I've worked in basically external relations for the Israeli Ministry of Defense. I did come into debating knowing quite a lot about like international affairs and so on. Here are a few of my thoughts though about research. One, what you need in terms of debate, of knowledge in debating is superficial knowledge about a lot of things. Like you're not supposed to be a subject matter expert on every debate. Often this will be harmful if you are. So I think that just remembering that and with that in mind, you know, I don't have much to give beyond the general tips of like read The Economist, listen to like, you know, there are nice easy to digest ways of getting information, like listening to John Oliver and things like that, which, yeah, it's useful because it helps you remember, and it's in a way that's fun, and like listening to podcasts, all these things that make research something that's enjoyable. That's definitely something I recommend. I have heard of like more extreme methods of doing this. Like I had a long time Israeli coach who told me what he would do is he would every week read The Economist cover to cover, and then he would prepare a summary of it, which helped him both in research, but also in just condensing large amounts of information in a short period of time, which is also a useful skill to have as a debater. So you could do stuff like that. I don't think it's necessary. I think having superficial knowledge about like current world affairs is probably enough in most cases. I think having like the trade-off in like there will probably be one or two debates at Worlds which are quite knowledge heavy. Like you'll need to know quite a lot of things. You have no idea what they're going to be. And if you try to research every hot current topic that's currently happening and research in depth, that's going to take dozens of hours, and I'm not entirely sure the effort is worth it in terms of like cost-benefit analysis. I will say, obviously, if you're interested in learning about different global crises and situations and so on, by all means do that. That's just a good thing to do in itself. In terms of what you need for debating, I would say two things. One, there are two issues that you definitely want to research for this Worlds. One is Korea. Knowing stuff like the host country of Worlds will usually have some motion about it. So knowing about the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea relations, useful. Research that, look at articles in CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, look at things in foreign affairs, all these different things that can help you with that. Second is COVID. You need to know things about COVID. I will be very surprised if there's no COVID motion. Even if there isn't, every debate is going to have examples from COVID. So knowing that will be useful. Second thing we're going to say on this is usually analysis in debate and analysis and logic are better than knowledge. They're stronger than knowledge. I'll give the wildest example I can think of, which is an Israeli team at Worlds in 2010, I think, which had a motion on 2009. This House would not allow members of the Tamil Tigers or generals in the Sri Lankan army to run for parliament. This is the motion. No info slide. Israeli team in opening government, they look at each other and they go, what do you know about this? I know there is a country named Sri Lanka. It sounds strange to me that tigers will sit in parliament, and that's about what I know. Then they have to say, okay, what do I do with this information? We are opening government. We're sending the context for this. What information can we infer from the actual motion? Tamil Tigers, it sounds like the name of a rebel group. It makes sense. And also, we know Tamil is an ethnic group. So there was probably some sort of civil war in this country. Where Tamil Tigers rebelled against the government or against the army. And probably the war ended because we're talking about an election, for politics. So the question is, we have a post-conflict society. And the question is, should we allow people who were like senior on both sides of this conflict to run for parliament and be represented? Okay, let's think of other contexts in the world where this might be relevant. And then they came up with like what happened if they're Israelis. So they started, okay, if the Palestinian Authority now had a reconciliation with Hamas, would we allow like the leaders from both sides to run for the new government? And this is something they know about, and they sort of implied the logic from one to the other. They took a second in that debate. With that, they took a second. And at the end, in feedback, the judge said, I really appreciate the fact that you didn't just dump on me all the knowledge you have about Sri Lanka. And they were like, we pretty much did. Anyway, so being the team that is able to infer, so first of all, usually you have enough to infer the general stuff. Being the team that's actually able to explain things and explain why things are likely, explain why this is likely to be, X is likely to be the case, is often more persuasive. Like when I have a debate about finance and I have 3 teams spewing jargon at me, and I have one team that actually explains how a basic economic process works, that team will often win the debate. So that's also useful to remember. Sometimes you will literally, like, sometimes you will crash and burn if you have no knowledge. That's like to be expected. Another story about an Israeli team that were that had to debate a motion. This house believes that ASEAN countries should unite behind the leadership of Anwar. They had no idea who Anwar was, and therefore they decided to run this about the dead president of Egypt, Anwar Sadat. They did not do well in that debate. But so yeah, sometimes that will happen. That's a risk you have to an extent to accept. Obviously, knowing stuff is useful. In most cases, you can get along quite well without it on most debates. One last word about preparation. This is for judges. Because I've talked this all the time until now. We're talking about preparation for a tournament. Now I'm going to be talking about the actual tournament. Between those two things, there is one thing that's unique for judges, and that is the judge test. The world's judge test. Super, super important, because especially if you don't have much of a CV, if you haven't broken at tournaments, if you haven't had a lot of achievements, and you're not well known, the judge test is going to be a major factor in how you're in your initial ranking as a judge. What does that mean? That means take the time to go over it don't rush it. Don't rush it. If there are questions you're unsure of, read the question again, read the briefing again. Don't consult external people because that's cheating. Don't do that. But take your time, sleep on it. Don't make rushed choices, because this can be the more time you spend on it, the likelier you are to actually make give correct answers, make correct correct call. I'm not sure if Worlds this year is going to have an actual debate which you watch and then have to adjudicate. If they do, that as well. Watch it more than once. Watch the speech twice. Watch if there is a specific part you're unsure of. Watch that again. Take your time with it. Don't go over the deadline, but use the time that you have in order to complete the judge test. And on the other hand, also don't panic about it too much, because this test is going to be probably difficult. I know Dan, I know the way he thinks. Very few people are going to get everything right. So you're not expected to be at the level where you have answered all the judge test questions correctly. But you can do, I remember at Worlds last year, we've had a few cases of judges that we knew nothing about, had almost no achievements, and scored really high on the test. These were judges that from day one we were testing. We were looking at them, we had different people evaluate them, and even if they didn't break, they were definitely seeing live rooms, they were sharing at the end of the tournament and making the most of their judge experience. Okay, let's talk about the actual tournament, unless anyone has further questions about preparation.
I have a question, Ayal. So I was watching a model, and the debater said that he recommended that we write down our arguments for 6 months. So we have a list of, 100 arguments that we could use in different motions. I would like to ask if this is a good strategy or not.
Okay, so this is a tough question, because it's really a matter of your approach. Personally, I have never case filed. I hate case filing. I think the reason I hate case filing is I think debate is is dynamic. It's always dynamic. Whenever I have tried to, when I've gotten a motion and I've tried to do what I've already done on this motion in a previous debate, this always went to shit. Like, I really think that, first of all, the activity is more fun when you're actually reacting to what's going on and rethinking and reevaluating things. I also think that you usually, when you do this, will do a better job. However, I acknowledge that some people, some excellent debaters are case filing, and I'm sure the person who said this in the module is someone that definitely is worth learning from. I'm not sure who it is, but I definitely believe that many good debaters do it. I have not done it, so I can't give a lot of recommendations about how to do it and so on. I would say if you're doing this, don't rely on it too much. Like, have it as a reference point, but don't try to copy the exact things you have done before, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Cool.
makes sense.
Cool. Great. So yeah.
As well.
Yeah, sure.
Many people prepare for these tournaments, especially big tournaments with coaches and stuff like that. How do you know when it's necessary, or when do you recommend that we do that, or did you do it in some
okay. So I've had the privilege of actually being a society that had a regular coach, and I think possibly the best debate coach in the world. Nevo is amazing. Like, the fact that he has consistently trained ESL teams that made open breaks and really high up in them as well. Then, sorry, just got distracted for a moment. I see the question on the chat. I'll respond to that in a second. So what I would, so I don't know how it works, honestly, in other places. Like, if you mean, if you being coached by someone, you mean paying money to someone to coach you individually, I honestly can't answer that, except like make your own assessment of how important this is to you in the sense of how much it costs versus what you're getting from it. Obviously, there can be like, getting personal coaching from someone can be very, very useful. I'm not going to deny that. However, you have limited resources, and like, you want to do, as I said, debating isn't everything in life. And if you end up spending large amounts of money on this, then that's something you have to make your own evaluation about. I can't really say much beyond that, unfortunately. If there is any like rephrasing of the question that might be where I might be able to assist, I'd be happy to. If not, then I'll. Okay, sorry. Okay, when you're training by yourself, how do you have good insights in your self-perception if you're doing well or bad? That's a great question, and that's why I said, I think in the beginning, that obviously like doing this training by yourself is nice to an extent. At the end, you have to have someone judging you. You have to have some external feedback to it. Like, there is a limit to how much you know your own advancement. I will say it's still sometimes useful. Like, I wouldn't do just a bunch if I had no debate practices with the society and with judges, and just do like a ton of personal drills. That's probably a bad idea, because I might be making some mistake and making it more and more consistently and teaching myself to be making that mistake. But if I'm in a situation where I have both the feedback from judges and doing some stuff with myself, or even better, doing stuff with myself and my partner that can sometimes like give me some external feedback at least, that's better. Ideally, sometimes you can also ask a third person to shadow your preps, like someone who is possibly more experienced, or just someone else from your society that has equal experience to you, to just sit and do like an objective assessment of how well you're doing in these drills. Like, obviously not every time, because that person also has a life, but occasionally doing it can be useful as well. And yes, if someone else has got a question, I'd be happy to take it.
All right, thank you. What's your stance on partner flexibility? Some of us here are novices, just now getting some stability in win rate, breaking, etc. During that time period, is it better to diversify partners as much as possible, or try and gain synergy with one specific partner?
I see. I think that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a definite answer for it. I think definitely so if you're talking about experiencing different partners for a while is useful because you wouldn't necessarily know which partner you have the best synergy with. I think unless you're talking about a society that has dozens of people in it, 50, 60 people, which is not usually the case. Usually it won't take you that long to try out different people and see which partnership works for you. Usually within a month, 2 months, some people you will just have bad chemistry with. That's part of how life works. And you'll have 1 or 2 debates with them and you'll know, I never want to debate with this person again. And that's not necessarily a bad reflection about them. It's just how your dynamic is. In other cases, you will switching partners occasionally is also fine. My partner for the first 2 years was not done. And he had different partners, I had different partners, and then we teamed up. Also, doing the occasional tournament with someone else is also completely fine and even a good idea. To occasionally switch up and practice different things. Generally, I think it is a good idea to, if you're aiming to go to major tournaments, you want to decide on a partner at least a few months in advance. You don't want to reach a situation where you're a month before the tournament and that's when you start training with your partner for the first time. I've seen some people pull it off, but that's quite a rare occurrence. So I would say definitely experiment. Okay, just a second. Mixed teams from different societies. Oh, I see. So that's useful context. Thank you. So what I'll say is, if you are speaking if your intention is to speak at Worlds or to speak at, I don't know, the regional Latin American tournament, whatever, that's usually there isn't an option for mixed teams. The teams have to be from the same institution or just speak at Worlds, and I think the same thing is true for regionals as well. So if that's your aim, then you should probably have a partner from your own society that you speak with regularly. Again, that doesn't mean you can't also speak with other people occasionally. I've obviously spoken with quite a lot of different partners in just the occasional tournament. Dan has done that significantly more than I have. So definitely learning from new people is also very useful. I hope I answered that. I will now go on to tournaments. I will be quite brief because I think the practice and training for it is the chief part. But I still have a few things that are important to say. Do tell me if I'm running over time, keeping you here too long or stuff like that. Just useful for me to know. Also, I will not be talking for more than the next half hour or so because then it will be midnight here in Israel and I will want to at some point prepare to go to sleep. But let's use the time that we have. Okay, during tournaments. Stress management, as I've said, is super, super important. And when I spoke about in the beginning about the switch that I have made personally, I think that's where the switch happened between Worlds 2017 and Worlds 2018. So I'll talk about that a bit. Because what happens is, when I spoke at Worlds, this was a 3-day tournament, 3 days of preliminary rounds, and then another 2 days of out rounds. Now, this Worlds, because it's going to be online, is going to be 5 days of in rounds and then another 3 days of out rounds. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And if you are and each round is its own thing. If you have completely fucked up your first round, that should not in any way affect what happens in round 2. And if you have fucked up, if you've done brilliantly in round 1, that also should not affect what happens in round 2. And as I said, teams can fuck up colossally and still recover and do greatly. Teams can do amazingly well and then collapse. Both things happen. Therefore, definitely the best strategy is if you're able to take each round as they come and give your best shot in each round. How do you make sure that you're actually able to do that? So I think Obviously, there are different mechanisms and different psychological, like people's psychology is obviously built differently. So what I'm saying here might not always apply to you, but I think what I'm saying is based on quite a lot of experience, both from myself, from people I've known, from people I've coached. So a lot of these things are useful to take into account. One, do things between rounds that are fun for you. Make sure you are listen to music. If you like, it's even nicer now that you're all at home. Like if you want to play a video game, you can do that. If you want to jump around in the air, you can do that. If you want to dance, anything that makes you feel good in your body and anything that makes you like release stress is excellent. Do those things, even if these seem silly. Before round 9 of Mexico Worlds, I was doing push-ups next to the dining room because I needed to wake myself up, because I wanted to feel like the adrenaline. That's what I was doing. Different for different people. So make sure you are getting sufficient food. Prepare food for yourselves for the days of the tournament. You will not have time to cook while rounds are going on. So make sure you have either you've ordered, you've cooked, you have like not just junk food that you're eating while debating. Actually have a meal next to you. Don't have a too heavy meal, the one to fill you up and make you tired. Like make sure you're managing it. Like have small a small thing before a round, then between the rounds have another like small thing to eat. Again, that's individual for you what a small or a big thing is. You know what makes you tired. Get sufficient sleep at night. Make sure you're sleeping like 7-8 hours a night. That's ideally, like again, individual for each person, but don't spend the entire night either obsessing or drinking or partying. Like if you want to party, fine, but like do make sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure you're bringing your body in the best way to each round, because the two things like the body and mind are obviously very, very tied to each other. That's the first thing. Second, group dynamic. Make sure, and here it's really, really important that partners be supportive of each other, because what often happens is you have a shit round, and sometimes that shit round will be your fault. Sometimes it will be your partner's fault. Sometimes it will be both your fault, and that's fine. But if it's your fault or your partner's fault, that might be a problem, because that's the point where either you blame each other or you feel like the other person is blaming you. And that creates a very stressful situation. That creates a situation where you feel you have to prove yourself, you feel like you're not good enough, you spiral into all these different negative thoughts. That's disastrous for your performance in future rounds. So having a good dynamic with your partner and setting expectations together with your partner, super, super important. If you have a good dynamic with a partner, but they expect to win the ESL category, and you're expecting to have fun and like learn from the tournament, you need to make sure that you are that your goals are more aligned in that, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of tension, and there's going to be a lot of like stress and anger and so on, and both of you are going to suffer. Like you're not going to win the ESL and you're not going to have fun. Like both, if you don't set your goals and adjust them. So doing that is really important. Talking to your partner and setting limits, like saying, these are things that make me stress out. Please don't do these things. Or these are things that are useful for me psychologically. Please do these things. Really, really helpful. Like, for example, some people like to talk about what happened in the round. They like to analyze it. They like to discuss all the different angles. Other people freak out because of it. If you are in one category and your partner is in the other, make sure you know that. Make sure that if you're the person who wants to obsess about what happened in the round, make sure you have other people to do that with that are not your partner. Like, do all these adjustments in advance. It will be really, really useful for your ability to function to function during the tournament. And obviously, recognize in advance that you are a team, that sometimes you will fuck up, sometimes your partner will fuck up. And in advance, know that you're okay with it, that you respect each other, and make that as clear between you as possible. Also, work in prep. Some people like to be very aggressive in prep, like no, cut to the next point, no, this is bullshit to go on. Some people will suffer from that and feel degraded and disregarded. Make sure you know what the other party is expecting. If you're both people who love to scream angrily at each other during prep, that's fine, and that's great for you. If one of you likes to scream angrily and the other person doesn't, that might be a problem. Work on that problem in advance. So team, the way you work as a team is really important. I would also say, I don't know what the situation is currently in Brazil in terms of COVID. I understand it's not ideal, let's put it this way. Are you able to meet with other people like physically from your society? No. So what I would suggest is every evening doing like a Zoom call with the people from your society. Chat to each other, have fun, chill, play games, do everything you can to create that feeling that you're not doing this alone, that you have people around you, that you have like the friends and so on. Some people, again, like to discuss how their team is doing in terms of points, in terms of how the debates went. Other people don't. Make sure you respect all of that. Don't discuss the performance of other teams if those teams don't want their performance discussed. Be supportive of each other, create that environment for each other. Again, this will, first of all, make your tournament better, but it will also create a better feeling all around. Now, just a second, I had something else on this. Okay, yeah. Here's the switch that I made that psychologically really helped me. And that was, I recognized that arbitrariness exists, that randomness exists. I recognized that I am at the best that I was able to come to at that point in time, like to that tournament. And from that point on, what I wanted was to have fun. I wanted to have good debates. I wanted to make good arguments that I will enjoy. And that was my thinking and my mode coming into every round. Like, I will do my best job in this round. I will have fun in this round. I will run cases that I find interesting. And if that means if I don't win this round, okay. Like, I have other things in my life. I did not join debating to win worlds because I did not know this tournament existed. Yeah, like I no longer, which I think happens to a lot of people, definitely happened to me. I no longer held my self-worth, tied my self-worth to debating. And I am not saying that's an easy thing to do, but I'm saying it's a very useful thing to do. And just release yourself from this pressure and from this stress. Remember that you are there to have fun. And in a few years' time, what you'll remember is how fun or how horrible this experience has been for you. And that's the important thing for you, that you're here to learn. If this is not your last worlds, then you're learning for the next one as well. And you're learning for other things in your life. And just keep that perspective is really, really important. In Mexico Worlds, after we broke on 25 points and were top speakers by like a margin of 30 points beyond the team below us, we got knocked out of the quarters. And what happened was, I got food poisoning the day before. I had bad food in Mexico, and I was like, during the octas, I was literally shivering because I haven't eaten in like 20 hours or something. I was pretty weak, had to go to the bathroom every like few moments or something. We managed to get through the octo. After a 2-hour discussion, got knocked out of the quarters. This sucked, but honestly, my reaction at the time was I didn't go to the announcement because I was, again, had food poisoning, stayed at the hotel. I got a message from my partner saying we didn't go through. I said, okay, and I went to sleep because yes, it was a bummer, but it didn't shatter me to know that we're not gonna be speaking in the final. Because again, I no longer was in a place where this was the most important thing in my life and this is what I have to do and so on. So And I think being in that place is much healthier psychologically. Now, again, I'm not saying I know the magic solution on how to do that. And obviously there is stress, there's adrenaline, and that's fun. But having some sort of perspective is also really, really useful. Of knowing that there are other things in your life, that this is a game, with a lot of moving parts that you're not always able to control. And you'll do your best and let the chips fall where they may. That's on the psychological side. A bit on the practical side. Make sure you are taking as many points as you can from each round. What does that mean? Sometimes that will mean taking the third and not the fourth. And that's as useful as taking the first and not the second. In terms of how many points this brings you, this is exactly the same thing. Why am I saying this? Because sometimes, okay, round one of Vienna Euros, we are opening government in a slightly op-heavy motion, not by much, or the way we define it definitely made it slightly op-heavy. And opening opposition is Oxford A, and closing opposition is Trinity B. This is round one. This is like the random draw that we got for round one. And we did our best. We took a third. And like that sucks, but that's how life is. And sometimes you get bad luck. We end up meeting those teams again and beating them at later parts of the tournament. But that's unrelated. The issue is, if we had freaked out by saying, oh fuck, we're OG and we have these really strong teams, we might have been fourth instead of being third. But as OG, you don't necessarily have a lot to do with it. As CO, you might decide that you don't see a way of beating top half. You currently, like top half was really strong teams, you don't know how you're going to beat them, but you can beat CG. And that might mean that you spend like 5-6 minutes of your case just rebutting CG. And that's fine, because that might be what gives you a point. And that might mean ignoring or significantly doing less to confront top half. And that's a fine strategic decision to make. Like seeing, especially as bottom half, what we are actually able to do at this point in the debate. And that could mean before my extension was given. That might mean after my extension was given. Like sometimes as a member, I have sometimes fucked up the extension. And if as a whip, I see that the extension speaker fucked up the extension, I have quite limited options, but within those options, I want to make sure I am getting the highest spot possible. That will probably not be a first, but it might be a second. It might be a second by rebutting a team. It might be a third by, I don't know, a clever weighing, anything like that, but just making sure we're taking as many points as possible. A few things on specifically the situation of being an ESL team. It's an ESL team from an less developed circuit specifically. So a few words on that and what you can do. So what many people do, many ESL teams do, is they say, okay, I know we have a problem, like we speak more slowly, we sometimes have issues of language barriers and words we can't say and so on. So what we'll do is we'll speak the fastest that we can to make up for as much of that gap. That's almost always a mistake, because what will happen is you will be less coherent. You will be, if you have a heavy accent, it will be harder to understand what you're saying. And if you don't have the best like eloquence, speaking really fast means sometimes people will not be able to understand what it is you're saying. My view, and this is my philosophy, do the opposite. Speak slower. Speak slower, explain things in simple language. Judges, you have no idea how many EPL judges cannot understand EPL teams. Like teams, those American or British teams that speak super fast, making like 5 arguments a minute, most judges are not following them. They make up stuff because like this is like Oxford. They must be really good. I'm probably the one not understanding what the hell it was they said. and they will be so many judges will be so appreciative of that team that just speaks plain English, speaks slowly, and explains basic concepts. Yeah, that's one thing that I would say. This is counterintuitive, but I think unless you are very specific people, like I can think of examples of ESL speakers who actually do speak faster and make more points than some EPL speakers, some of the best EPL teams. I can think of examples like this. If you've been following the European circuit, you might know who I'm referring to, and that's great, but that's not the case for many people. So play to your strengths, and your strengths being the fact that you have to, when you're speaking slower, first of all, you are more understandable, you're more relatable, but also you're able to, and you have to prioritize what's important. Because I'm going to make a differentiation here between the highest level of debates, where you actually have speakers like Michael DG that I mentioned before, like Harish, people who speak really fast and every word they say is on point. Like they don't have a sentence that doesn't have a very specific reason why they're saying that sentence. And against those people, you're going to have a very hard time as an ESL team. However, most cases, they're just throwing out everything they thought of. Like, and some of it is relevant, some of it is irrelevant, some of it is useful, some isn't. You don't have that privilege. You need to think more. What is the most important argument I want to be making? Why is this the most important argument? Explain that explicitly. Like, we're going to prove this thing. And this thing is really important because X, Y, Z. And if we prove this one thing, then we can take all their points. Meaning, you have to think strategically. The way to win, in my opinion, the way to win and to get the highest levels as an ESL team, as an EFL team, is thinking strategically, is prioritizing, is doing active weighings, which nobody does, like actually explaining why it is that we are above another team, not because our arguments are better than theirs, which is most of the weighings you hear, but like this argument is actually like fundamental to everything that's happening in the debate and actually walking the judges through that. Super, super useful. That's the strength you can play to, because that has nothing to do with how quickly you speak. This has to do with how much thought you have given into this in prep. Just a second. Don't use words you are uncertain of whose meaning you're uncertain. Like, don't use big words if you're not entirely sure what they mean. I've had a funny story I've heard in that is a speaker that for an entire speech, instead of saying discourse, said intercourse, which means sex, and the entire speech was about how we get better intercourse, deeper intercourse, and you get the drift. So be careful of that. If you're not so sure what a word means, use a simpler one, and that's completely fine. So besides that, I will say, I think that generally speaking, if we're looking at like a trend, ESL bias or EFL bias is declining. Like, there is less of it now than there was 10 years ago, than there was even 5 years ago. And I think you can see that with the fact that in 3 last World Championships, in Mexico, there was a team that, an ESL team broke first, and another ESL team broke fourth. And a few other ESL teams made the open break quite high. In the 2 worlds after that, in Cape Town and in Mexico, there was and in Thailand, there was an ESL team in the open final. And that does say, first of all, that there was an improvement. It also says that judges know, more judges, less people are going to be willing to dismiss people just for their accent or just for their language barriers out of hand. And that's a really useful thing for you to know as speakers, as judges, as whatever. However, with that in mind, if you are in a situation where you feel you are being like EPL'd, as they say, call it out, put it on the table. We've had, in the final of Cambridge IV, I've had the chance of giving the POI that said, we were OG, I listed all our arguments and then said, all these things were not answered, even when CG repeated them with nicer English. And people, like the judges, cracked up. It was one of the best moments of my debating career, and it did help us win. It swayed like 2 judges, but don't be afraid to call it out. If someone dismisses you because, like, just dismisses you out of hand, doesn't relate to what you're saying, say, like, yeah, we know we might be speaking worse English, but that does not mean we're not a team that exists within this debate. Obviously, don't exaggerate it. Like, don't do it if you don't have a clear notion that someone has actually done this to you, because sometimes, you know, you can be oversensitive and people haven't meant to do anything like that. But if that happens within a debate where you feel that someone is just trying to beat you by using fancier, rosier language, call it out. Judges are aware of this, and so on. If you get this from judges, point it out to edge course. Like, that's edge course take really seriously if they hear multiple like complaints about the same judge being ESL biased. They will take this into account, and they are going to do things. So it might not be helpful for you. It might be helpful for the next team that judge is going to see. So don't be afraid to call out these things. If they happen, I don't think they happen as often. Last thing I want to talk about, both as speakers and as judges, managing expectations. What it is you're hoping to achieve at Worlds. If this is your first, even your second year in debating, a break at Worlds is great, but not necessarily what you're aiming for. What you're aiming for might just be having one really good round. It might just be learning a lot from this experience, because 9 rounds teach you a lot. You learn a lot of different lessons, and you're doing it against people from all over the world. It's a really educational experience, and that is a goal in itself. If you want to end on more points than you have last year, that's also a fine goal. Like, it doesn't have to be winning. It doesn't have to be like being the EFL or ESL champion. And remembering that is really important. Judges, if you are a wing judge from like with no prior experience, the chances of you breaking at Worlds are quite slim. They exist, but they are quite slim. What other goals could you have? For example, knowing that, for example, judging the live rooms in the last rounds means that you have done a good job. Like, if you are judging rooms from which teams have broken in round 9, that means, as a wing, that means you have done a good job. That you've proven yourself quite well to the edge core. You've gotten good feedback. It could mean sharing in round 9, even if it's a dead room. Like, it's a room from which no one breaks, but still you have gotten to chair at Worlds. That's great. That's a great achievement. If you at like first tournament, I judged that. I didn't break, I didn't share. But in round 8, I saw the top room. I was a wing in the top room. And that was great. Like, I saw an excellent debate. I got to take part in judging that debate, where I think we gave the highest speak we gave was an 88, which was definitely justified. This was a sheesh. Anyway, long time ago. Yeah, so managing your expectations is really useful. I'm not saying give up in advance, but just having a lower bar of what it is you'd be happy with walking away with can be really, really useful, both psychologically, both for your performance throughout the tournament. I think this is all I had to say. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And I hope you found this generally useful.
Ayal, how did you practice your English to do these tournaments?
So again, when we talk about, I talked before about myself having certain advantages that it came with. So I think my level of English was quite good to begin with, regardless of debating. Like, first of all, I have a sister, from my father's previous marriage, who lives in Denmark, where the only way I could communicate with her, given I don't speak Danish and she doesn't speak Hebrew, was speaking English. So at quite a young age, I would have conversations in English. And also having worked in external relations, so I had a pretty good level of English to begin with. I will say, I think a few tips I can give on this. So none of them will be tips for how to learn English at all, but like how to finesse it for a tournament. Obviously, doing rounds in English is probably the most useful thing you can do. Like doing debate rounds. I think in Tel Aviv specifically, from around like for half the year at least, debate rounds happen in English. They're the only society I think in Israel that does this, but doing a lot of debate practices in English is in itself very useful, because even if you know how to have a conversation, that doesn't necessarily mean you know how to make a debate argument. So the most useful thing you can do is just have rounds, and you develop from one to the other. The second thing I will say, and I've said this, but I will stress this again: don't speak too fast. What happens is when you're speaking, your mind has to catch up with the words you're saying. When it's a foreign language, your mind catches up slower. That means speaking slower means you will stumble less, you will stutter less, you will say less words that you have not meant to say. So even if it means that you feel you will make less arguments, speaking slightly slower is a very, very useful thing to do. I will say one of the best debaters, the people I admire most in the Israeli circuit, stammers. Like he has a stammering problem, and both outside debates and within them. And that means he will usually make either 1 or 2 points within a speech, regardless of the language he speaks in. And he is excellent because the points he makes are great points. And speaking slower is not necessarily a disadvantage. Third thing I'll say, when during a time of a tournament, like there was a question I think I got on in the months before, do you switch to English? No, I don't switch my entire life to English. But while I'm at a tournament, if I know English is something I'm struggling with, I will try to have conversations in English. I will try, if before the round in the morning, to have maybe a conversation with my partner in English. I'll try to have conversations with other people in English, just to make sure like I'm getting the rust off before the actual debate starts. Now, there is a question about prep and note-taking. Different people find different things useful to them. I have almost never prepped in English. Like my preps are almost, except when I've spoken with people who did not speak my language, which is quite rare. My preps were almost exclusively in Hebrew. My notes were also in Hebrew. I simultaneously translated them while giving the speeches. This was easier for me than writing in English. This can be different for different people. What I will say about note-taking specifically is if there are words that you know you will struggle with, or words that you find important, make sure they are written on your page in English in like big capital letters, just to make sure that you will know how to access this word when you need it, or this word needs to be said. I think that's basically what I have to say about that.
So I think no more doubts, right? So thank you so much, Ayal, for having us here. Thank you for your patience, time, energy, and dedication. This module was really helpful, and we are really honored to have you here. So now I will end the recording and the live.